Repetition music. Repetition is important in music, where sounds or sequences are often repeated. It may be called restatement, such as the restatement of a theme. While it plays a role in all music, with noise and musical tones lying along a spectrum from irregular to periodic sounds, Moravcsik, 114 Rajagopal, it is especially prominent in specific styles. Repetition. A literal repetition of a musical passage is often indicated by the use of a repeat sign or the instructions da capo or del segno. Repetition is a part and parcel of symmetry and of establishing motifs and hooks. You find a melodic or rhythmic figure that you like, and you repeat it throughout the course of the melody or song. This sort of repetition helps to unify your melody. It's the melodic equivalent of a steady drum beat, and serves as an identifying factor for listeners. However, too much of a good thing can get annoying. If you repeat your figure too often, it will start to bore the listener. Memory affects the music listening experience so profoundly, as scores of theorists and philosophers have noted. Music is based on repetition. Music works because we remember the tones we have just heard and are relating them to the ones that are just now being played. Those groups of tones phrases might come up later in the piece in a variation or transposition that tickles our memory system at the same time as it activates our emotional centers. Levitin, 162-163. Theodore W. Adorno criticized repetition and popular music as being psychotic and infantile. In contrast, Richard Middleton, 1990, argues that while repetition is a feature of all music of any sort, a high level of repetition may be a specific mark of the popular, and that this allows an enabling of an inclusive rather than exclusive audience. Middleton, 1990, p. 139. There is no universal norm or convention for the amount or type of repetition. All music contains repetition, but in differing amounts and of an enormous variety of types. This is influenced by the political economy of production, the psychic economy of individuals, the musico-technological media of production and reproduction, oral, written, electric. Thus, Middleton, also 1999, distinguishes between discursive and musematic repetition. A museme is a minimal unit of meaning, analogous to morpheme in linguistics, and musematic repetition is at the level of the short figure, often used to generate an entire structural framework. Discursive repetition is at the level of the phrase or section, which generally functions as part of a larger scale argument. He gives paradigmatic cases, the riff and the phrase. Musematic repetition includes circularity, synchronic relations, and openness. Discursive repetition includes linearity, rational control, and self-sufficiency. Discursive repetition is most often nested hierarchically in larger repetitions and may be thought of as sectional, while musematic repetition may be thought of as additive. P. 146-148. Put more simply, musematic repetition is simple repetition of precisely the same musical figure, such as a repeated chorus. Discursive repetition is both repetitive and non-repetitive. Lot, p. 174, such as the repetition of the same rhythmic figure with different notes. During the classical era, musical concerts were highly expected events, and because someone who liked a piece of music could not listen to it again, musicians had to think of a way to make the music sink in. Therefore, they would repeat parts of their song at times, making music like sonata very repetitive without being dull. Foen, repetition is important in musical form. The repetition of any section of ternary form results in expanded ternary form, and in binary form the repetition of the first section at the end of the second results in rounded binary form. Edward and Saker, 315. Schenker argued that musical techniques' most striking and distinctive characteristic is repetition. Kivy, 327, while Boulez argues that a high level of interest in repetition and variation, analogy and difference, recognition, and the unknown is characteristic of all musicians, especially contemporary, and the dialectic conversation. Campbell, 154. Types of repetition include exact repetition hour, repetition after digression or a bow, and non-repetition act. Copland and Slatkin offer Au clair de la lune and H. du Liber Augustin play as examples of a bow, and the Seeds of Love as an example of the last. Copland and Slatkin, unpaginated. At the tone level, repetition creates a drone. Repetitive music. Some music features a relatively high degree of repetition in its creation or reception. Examples include minimalist music, krautrock, disco, and its later derivatives such as house music, some techno, some of Igor Stravinsky's compositions, Barokoko, and the Suzuki method. Think 2005 P5. Other important genres with repetitive songwriting are post-rock, ambient/dark ambient, and black metal. Psychological interpretations. Genres that use repetitive music. DJ at disco clubs in the 1970s played a smooth mix of long single disco records to keep people dancing all night long. The 12-inch single was popularized as a means to this end. While disco songs do have some repetitive elements, such as a persistent, throbbing beat, these repetitive elements were counterbalanced by the musical variety provided by orchestral arrangements and disco mixes that added different sound textures to the music, ranging from a full orchestral sound to stripped-down break sections. The electronic dance music genres that followed disco in the 1980s and 1990s, such as house music and techno, kept the bass drum rhythm introduced by disco, but did not use the orchestral arrangements or horn sections. House and techno had a more minimalist sound that layered electronic sounds and samples over a drum machine drum part and a repetitive synth bass line. Extremely repetitive song structures are also used by some black metal bands like Burzum, Darkthrone, Forgotten Woods, Luster, and Straborg.